So I knew some people who were working overseas with an organization called Sea Shepherd Global. And I don't know if you're familiar with Sea Shepherd Global at all.
I don't know anything about all of this world, and
Yeah.
I'm super interested because I was fascinated with this kind of space when I was younger, but
Yeah. So directly kind of coming from the hardcore music scene, I knew friends who had gone and joined these ships that they were going like these fucking, DIY crews, manning these ships and going to Antarctica and like fucking up Japanese whalers, I was like, that shit sounds hard as fuck. You know what I mean? Like I was like, this sounds way better than like buying groceries for Whole Foods. So I like hit up a few people that I knew that were kind of doing that thing. And I was like, so what if I like sell all my shit and like come to Australia and like join one of these ships? And they're like, oh, it's pretty hard to get on or whatever. I didn't know much about it at the time, but I was like, yo, that shit sounds awesome. So I was like, Antarctica? Like, yeah, I want to go there.
You're listening to the Art and War podcast with your hosts, Mitch and Nathan. Mitch is a former airborne infantry squad leader who now spends most of his time coaching soccer. Nathan is a professional illustrator and an avid shooter with a couple of years of Canadian military experience. Together, they run the Seaburn Art page. Enjoy the show.
Boom. Hello, and welcome to the Art and War podcast. I'm going to introduce it like I introduced my show because I don't know how else to do this. So, I'm B.R, producer of the podcast, and joining me today are the usual hosts, Nathan and Mitch.
Hello.
Special guest today joining us is Jack, CEO of Guerrilla Tactical. Thank you for joining us.
That's me.
Also, hello.
Glad to be here.
So, we like to talk to people running companies in this industry and try and get different perspectives on where gun culture is going. And hopefully you'll offer a few fresh perspectives, and I think we'll get into it. But first off, you mind telling us like a little bit about your company, kind of what you guys do?
Yeah, so Guerrilla Tactical is an interesting company. About 10 years ago, I was living in upstate New York, where I was back there for the summer or something.
I'm so sorry.
It was a little bit different, but not so much back then. I had Kydex was definitely a thing. Some of the other companies like T-Rex were just getting going. And I had thought I was a shooter, did training, and I thought to myself, like, oh, I want to start I want to make Kydex for myself. And I got this idea about making Kydex holsters to sell because I'm like an entrepreneur type person. I was kind of raised that way. It didn't work out. I did some work for my dad at the time. He bought me a bunch of the tools in trade. I just got busy with other things. They collected dust. So fast forward, a decade or whatever. I was working overseas on ships. That's primarily what I do. I'm sure we'll get into that as well during the podcast. But COVID happened, in case you didn't realize, it kind of messed up things around the world. So I was twiddling my thumbs at home. I'm kind of like a maker type as well, a tinkerer, and I was doing some high quality, knives, and I was using Kydex for the sheaths. And so a friend of mine said, hey, can you make me a holster for my Glock? And I said, well, probably, can do something like that. Got a blue gun at the time. We made a holster, came out pretty good. Before you know it, they told their friend, they're like, hey, can you make me a holster? And I'm already doing Kydex for knife sheaths. So I'm like, okay, cool. Like, let's see what happens here. And just started rolling with it. And the funny thing is I still have a bunch of those tools that I did work for and traded for my dad years ago. Still had them here with me in Washington, and we put them to work. And fast forward almost, a year and a half, things really took off, and now it's a full-time business. There's, a few of us working every single day, making holsters, making gear, making media content, just trying to do our thing. So actually I stopped working on ships. I haven't gone back to work on ships since, and just am doing Guerrilla Tactical full-time.
Hell yeah.
I got a question for you because I'm also a former New Yorker. Do you think
I'm also so sorry.
Do you think there's any chance that New York ever isn't controlled by the city?
Sorry, I'll go on.
You just want to talk about this.
I really do.
You do. I'm really into it.
I think we see that a lot in all sorts of states. Like the state I'm living in right now, in Washington State. I live in rural Washington. My wife and I moved out here with a good friend about 3 years ago. We bought 9 acres out in the woods. We built our own homestead, essentially, built our own cabin with our own hands. We garden, we live simply, we prepare for whatever that might mean to, us. But what we do see is we see heavy control from the capital of Olympia and, the government in Seattle. So you see a lot of things get imposed out in rural areas. And I think it's the same thing in New York. So as far as like if the state upstate itself will be separate and not be controlled by New York City, I kind of have my doubts because New York City is such a concentrated area with so many people, whereas in our rural areas, it's spread out. So, obviously the people in, the government in New York City is hand in hand with the government in the capital of Albany and, making those laws and regulations for the whole state. So it's kind of, I see the same thing happening here. I think it's the same thing in Oregon. I think it's the same thing in a lot of almost any, rural area is going to be affected by the bigger cities, whether that be good or bad.
Well, not just with, the stupid laws that they impose on the rest of the state, even though the entire rest of the state disagrees with it. I don't know if I'm trying to think of where you were at. And did you ever go swimming in the Hudson River as a kid?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. And it was awesome. And then I went back to New York to visit family like 7 years ago, and you can't swim in that thing anymore. Like it is so grossly polluted that it's a health hazard now that you can't even go swimming in there.
Yep.
The whole state seems to be, I mean, it was already kind of, slowly going downhill as the city took more and more control and imposed more and more things.
Sure.
But, from everything from the laws to the taxes to the, the pollution of the Hudson River and, everything else, it's really fucked up the state. And there's a reason a lot of people are migrating out of it almost at the same rate as California.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that you're dealing with a lot of, human error as well when you talk about like touching wild spaces and just humans are fucking disgusting in a lot of ways and just destroy those. It's like
tell it how it is, man.
So, I mean, I definitely see what you're saying there. And, from all the fucked up laws and as well as the, that controlling government factor and the pollution itself. Like, we see that out here in Washington as well.
Were you kind of homesteading in New York too? Like doing the gardening and all that stuff?
Yeah. So I grew up on a 14-acre organic vegetable farm. My parents were business owners. They were both English teachers in the 70s, thought the school system sucked, said if we have kids, we're going to homeschool our kids, which I was homeschooled. So was my sister. I didn't come from a religious background. My family was agnostic growing up. And, that was kind of one of my dad's fantasies when he was alive, was just to build this like family business, family homestead, work together, and just be, lead by example and be good people. So that's kind of my upbringing. I learned hard work, work ethic. I learned, how to manage my time, manage my money, as well as just be a kind person and be a good person to my neighbor and help people along the way. So that's one of the things that we try to do with, Guerrilla Tactical is kind of spread some of those positive messages that I learned growing up with the role models that I did. And of course, when I was younger, I was like, living in rural New York, I was like, I love rural spaces. I love, fucking building tree houses in the woods. And, we had like a BMX track out in we race BMX and jump BMX, and we're able to have like free reign of all this property and just do cool stuff. Obviously shooting guns from a young age. And then as I got older, I was kind of like, well, I want to get out of rural areas. I think I'm like a city person. I was like, I want to be a city person and go live in a city. So I ended up moving to Texas with a girl I was dating at the time when I was about 19.
Oh, damn.
So I left. She was from Texas, maybe 20. I don't know. So I lived in Texas for a few years. I'm sure we'll get into that as well. But nowadays, now I'm going to be 33 this year, and all I want to fucking do is homestead. So it's funny that like it goes full circle. And as a kid, I'm kind of like, fuck this, Dad. I don't want to do this. I want to do my own thing, right? And now, like, I wish he could see us and what we've accomplished now, because it's like exactly what he wanted. So it's pretty cool.
I always love to hear from the people who are homeschooled coming on this show, because I wasn't homeschooled. I'm a product of public education, for better or worse, mostly worse. And whenever I hear people coming on and being like, yeah, my childhood was awesome, I got to be a kid, basically. And it's not just like, yeah, I was basically locked in the basement reading books and praising some kind of saint or something. It's always good to hear those positive experiences.
Absolutely. And like, there's always the stereotypical case of homeschooled kids that you said. It's like, the inbred looking family that comes down to the Walmart from, from the hills once a month for supplies or whatever, and, goes back up and you never see civilization again. But that wasn't my experience at all. My sister and I both, she's 5 years younger than me. We both started working at a very young age through the family business. We were, ringing register. We were dealing with all sorts of people from a very young age. So we got, our social skills and our ability to communicate and work with others really kind of blossomed at a young age. And that was one of the things that I was stuck with me. Is a lot of my friends, like I played ice hockey in high school for a high school team, even though I didn't go to the school. And most of my friends were in public school. There weren't too many other people around my immediate area as I got older who were doing homeschooling. But one of my friends at the time, we were at a restaurant or something, and he says to me like, well, what I don't understand about homeschooling is like, obviously your social skills are a zero. And I was like, you've known me for like 12 years, dude. Like, you know how I am. You tell me what you think. He's like, oh yeah, you're right. So it's like we definitely had a really good upbringing, and we were able to, like you said, be kids and do kid stuff. We learned a lot along the way. But as far as like structured, 10 hours a day, our parents hounding us with schoolwork and stuff, we didn't have that. And I turned out okay. So
well, you run a business, and have by the sounds of it lived a full life. So
yeah,
I mean,
I should write a book, I think, one day.
Hell yeah.
How old did you say you were again?
I'm going to be 33 this year.
Oh, that's very full life by that. God, once I'm not the oldest person in the room. That's nice.
Yeah, we can definitely get into my 20s, because we definitely did a lot of crazy stuff. So
so moved to Texas at 19 and being raised on what sounds like a pretty libertarian upbringing, you ended up with some straight edge exes. I'm wondering where this comes into the story, and obviously it's a big part of the brand as well. So
yeah, I mean, so I grew up, like I said earlier, before we started recording, Syracuse, New York was kind of my stomping grounds. I grew up in the hardcore punk and music, hardcore punk scene in Syracuse, and so, I mean, that's a lot of my friends were there. I used to go to hardcore shows all the time. And there was a big, big culture. And there still is. It's not as big as it was in like the early 2000s and late 90s, but of straight edge culture. So I knew a bunch of I have family members who are dead because of drugs and alcohol. I have friends who have ruined their fucking lives because of, drinking problems and whatnot. And I partied pretty hard when I was kind of probably 16, 17. And I was, after like one particular summer, I was just like, this isn't for me. I was like, I don't want to go down this path. I was already had friends in, hardcore music who were straight edge. And that's where, I learned about it, and I said, hey, this is the path for me. So it's not for everyone. And it's not something that I'm overly vocal about, or I don't judge people, or, because everyone comes to, their own thing that they feel that they need to do, which is best for their own life. But for me, I think it's the right choice, and that's where that came from. So
yeah, I love that. I mean, it's all about taking accountability, and that's a lot of what these kind of revolving themes I find in both the prepping kind of community of being responsible for yourself, and also the punk scene.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's what's most interesting to me about your brand is. And something that I found building my own brand as well is there is a weird overlap between like DIY and then this tactical world, and no one, like, it's barely anyone gets to see it, but then there's this like small niche community. I mean, how many different variants of a Misfits fiend with nods on have you seen?
Right. it's definitely super interesting to be involved with it because, like you said, the firearms community and this industry is quite large, and there's so many different facets. But within I feel like we're kind of on the cusp of this little niche, even though we don't do like hype brand merch stuff. Companies that I'm friends with, some of the guys like Superior Defense. That dude's like an old straight edge guy. Anti-FUD, like the FUD Worldwide stuff. That dude's like a really great straight edge tattooer from Southern California.
Yep. Albert Defense
Albert
out
Defense,
in Jersey.
Hardcore. Yep. Hardcore dude. We probably went to a bunch of the same shows when we were younger because he and I were around the same age. And then like Fear Tomorrow is another brand. It's like another old hardcore dude who's a straight edge guy. So it's cool to see kind of that, like that hardcore culture kind of spill over into the gun community. So it's kind of cool, even though we own like a gear company that is a manufacturing company. It's kind of cool to see like this, we're on like this cusp of this little niche market as well, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. And I don't know, like if it's going to keep on growing. It seems to be, because more and more people are like, oh, this is a thing that exists. And there is someone actually catering to this tiny audience. I thought I came on and I was like, maybe I'll find 200 other people who kind of share that same overlap, but it just I keep on finding more and more people. And when I found, like you said, someone actually, like all of the cool merch and cultural stuff is cool,
Sure.
But actually someone who wants to go a step beyond that into, well, there's certain communities that don't have as readily accessible knowledge with medical training or carrying a gun or anything in those kind of realms. It's like, you might have a gun in the house, but hey, here's a way to actually push it into modern gun culture and to, kind of get in line with the rest of this thing that's constantly evolving.
Yeah, absolutely.
This episode is brought to you by Midwest Gunworks. Midwest Gunworks, they have quite literally everything that you would ever need for any type of firearm, and if they don't have it, they can order it for you. I went through them when it came to building my bolt-action competition and hunting rifle. They've been nothing but a pleasure and a joy to work with. I'm happy that I went through them as a customer, and now they're a sponsor of the show, so that's pretty cool. Use code ARTANDWAR to save some money on your order with Midwest Gunworks. Once again, that's code ARTANDWAR and MidwestGunworks.com. Thank you very much.
How's it going, guys? This is B.R. speaking. That's spelled Bravo Romeo if you don't sprechen Sie Eurotrash. I'm the producer and editor of the Art and War podcast. I'm here to tell you about our Patreon. Thanks to your support, both listening to the show and subscribing to the Patreon, we've been able to steadily increase the quality of what we put out, and it's only going to get bigger from here. We want to keep pushing this show as far as we can, and video podcasts, and dare I say, perhaps even a studio, are almost within our sights. You can help us get there by checking out the Art and War Patreon and choosing a tier of support that works for you. But we aren't a charity case. Our Patreon subscribers enjoy 5 different tiers of exclusive perks, ranging from all of the content the lads would post on a pre-Zuckerberg Instagram, download any and all of Mitch and Nathan's guides and illustrated targets in glorious high resolution, behind the scenes info like guest schedules, and at our highest tier, get monthly art commissions created by Nathan himself. You can find our Patreon via the link in this episode's description, or in the CBNR page's bio on Instagram. Thanks for listening, guys. Now let's get back to the show.
So when it comes to being, that straight edge and that lifestyle, can you explain that a little bit to me? Because I have an idea in my head. I was involved in kind of like the punk rock scene, kind of growing up, like if you consider like Warped Tour and going to Northern Lights and all that stuff in New York. But I want to clarify that for you. What does that mean for you being straight edge?
Yeah, so I mean, like straight edge dates back to the 80s. It's like a subculture from a subculture of the punk music scene. Traditionally, like punk rock dudes and kids were drug addicts and alcoholics and things like that, because in their mind that was like fuck the establishment. You know what I mean? Some people kind of got together and they're like, well, how can we really be? Let's see, how do I want to say this? Like, how can we really be like more forward thinking in the sense that like to truly be revolutionary? How revolutionary can one be if you are constantly dumbed down from drugs and alcohol? So that kind of came from that, and obviously like the punk rock music scene has a anti-authoritarian or like federal government kind of message as well in its own way. And I think that was kind of something that resonated with me is as I got older, as I saw friends and family affected by drugs and alcohol, I thought to myself, like, yeah, if I'm dumbed down, like, how can I be the best version of myself if I'm constantly fucked up? So it's kind of a twofold thing for me. Like, I want to be like the best version I can be and in control of myself and my own thoughts at all times, knowing that I'm making good decisions. But also, like, I didn't want to go down a negative path that I'd seen friends and family go down and literally, quite literally destroy their lives, destroy their families' lives, and or end up dead. That it's just not something that I was interested in being a part of.
Gotcha. So do you think when people consume, like alcohol in like moderation, they're not an alcoholic. They just, casually have like a couple of drinks with some friends, or maybe they smoke a little weed to relax at the end of the day. Is that something that kind of goes against that lifestyle?
So, like I said, I think it's kind of on an individual's basis, like, whatever works for you. I'm not one to judge at all. I'm not, it's kind of like a hard line drawn in the sand when you claim straight edge, like just growing up in that subculture. It's just kind of a thing that, that we've chosen to, abide by and live our lives like. But as far as like, 90% of the people I know, smoke a little weed and, drink socially. It's like, my wife, for instance, she's not straight edge and like, she's amazing. So it's not something that I am just only associating with people who are the same as me. And I definitely don't cast any judgment or whatever to, people who are going to do their thing. Like it's not for me, but I can also like be a fun person to go hang out at bars sober. It's not a big deal for me.
I was gonna say, like, I had a straight edge mate back in England. Well, he's not dead because he's eating and drinking healthy. But but yeah, he was the most fun out of any of us. We'd be out at the clubs. We'd all be shit faced or high or whatever. He'd be way more fun.
Yeah,
having a ball dead sober. It's like, power to you, dude.
The constant joke that I always get, the running joke is like, "Well, we always have a designated driver."
Yeah. He did get that job, but we appreciate it.
Yeah, not for sure.
No, that's definitely a respectable lifestyle. And like you said, if you're not casting judgment on others, if they're just, casually enjoying something, I think that's awesome. It's definitely a healthier way to go about life. Because alcohol, even if you casually drink it, it's not good for you.
Sure.
So it's definitely a healthier approach to life, and I can definitely respect that. I do find that, especially when you start getting into those niche groups, I have found that people get there's a reason it's niche, and most of the time it's niche because people aren't very friendly and inviting, and it's you have to be within these certain parameters or you're wrong and you're not a part of this group. So it's actually really refreshing to hear that it's kind of like, yeah. Wherever you draw that line is cool. And, if you do, you do. If you don't, you don't. Like, I can still associate with you. I have the utmost respect for that.
Yeah. I think that those parallels can be drawn to many, many different people's ways of life. It doesn't have to be about if you drink or not, but it could be, across the board. There's, what you just said can be applied. So absolutely.
Yeah. There's cool people with all different types of philosophies and upbringings and, political beliefs. Right. You brought up being homeschooled. Not to go backwards, I found, I was reflecting a little bit on like my upbringing. I went to a public school, but there was a large community of people that were homeschooled in my town where I was from. And I was thinking about that the other day, and I've even, the further you got out and, the rest of upstate, there's a lot of people that get homeschooled up there. And I kind of think, I think it's because it's so spread out. Like my school, for example, we had to combine two of the towns just to have one school. And you're so far away from, town and, the normal societal like structure that it's like, we'll homeschool. And they grew up to be, even growing up around them when they would play sports with us on our teams, just seeing them. I went to church, and everybody at church was homeschooled. None of them were weird. None of them were socially awkward. I dated my first girlfriend was homeschooled. She was awesome.
There's a joke in there somewhere.
Well,
somewhere.
No, there's no. I mean, she cheated on me, but I was in like sixth grade.
That part
so
sucks.
I mean, I was in sixth grade. So can you really count it? You know?
Okay, that doesn't count.
Held hands with another boy. The bitch.
Yeah, but it is funny, and it's cool because the more that I'm kind of learning about and actually caring, because when you're young, you're like, oh, you're homeschooled. I don't fucking care. Like, you know, you're a weirdo. But I didn't even have that thought because I had friends that were homeschooled. It's cool learning about that now and then reflecting and being like, holy shit, that was a really popular thing in my area back then. And now it's getting more popular everywhere.
Yeah, isn't it like 11 to 12% of the population is homeschooled now? And it's rising. It's the highest it's been in a really long time.
I saw some crazy number, like 200,000 or something.
I don't know.
Yeah, I forgot.
I mean, yeah, it very well could be. I mean, growing up in the 90s, it was big. The homeschooling movement in upstate New York was large. I mean, there was like some homeschool groups, they call them, where you kind of like stay in touch, and it's sort of like a support system. It's not like a culty clicky thing, but it was just like you kind of upstate had like a couple of groups that were, families kind of doing that whole thing. So there was a wide range of people involved in that. There was some weirdos for sure. But the majority of the people that I had met through there were super, what I would consider normal people. I would consider myself to be a pretty capable individual, and a lot of these people were that way as well. So it was refreshing to see because, the way they portray it in movies and everything, especially when it was, back then, it was kind of weird. It was almost like taboo to homeschool your kids at a certain time when I was growing up. A lot of people looked at you weird. They're like, what the hell's wrong with your family? So, just like many other things in my life, I consider it a stereotype that I like to break.
That's cool. Yeah, that's especially in England. Like whenever I talk to friends and family back home, like they have a really negative perception of it because they're even more removed from it than a lot of the American system is. I would be like, yeah, we're thinking about homeschooling our kids, and they're like, oh, and they I know what they're picturing. They're picturing like kids who grew up in Waco or something, like or Jonestown or some shit. It's like Jesus. I don't know. I think that mold's being broken, but
yeah.
Well, I had like one last question on that before, because we're not doing like a homeschooling podcast, but I love the topic so much. So what was your kind of socialization like when you were being brought up doing the homeschool and stuff?
So we were pretty fortunate because we owned a business. My parents owned a business ever since I was, a child. It's no longer, my dad passed away 4 years ago. My mom sold the business after that and closed it all down. So we don't own it anymore in the family. But we had a business. Like I said, there was a 14-acre organic vegetable farm as well that we, worked the land ourselves. And because of that, we were, from a very young age, we were socialized with all sorts of people, all different backgrounds, all different ages. My sister and I just working in that business from a very young age. I mean, I think I was 8 years old. This was a little bit before everyone freaked out about, your kids working at your business. I was like 7 or 8 ringing register for like, 50, 60-year-old people buying stuff. It was no big deal. And then because of that and the sports that I played, I was very active in sports growing up. Because of that, I had like tremendous socialization. I was an avid skateboarder as well. So there was that. I played semi-pro paintball I think I played for 7 years through my teens, basically every weekend in a different state, competing in national events. And then ice hockey for 14 years. We had a big ice hockey family. We had a 100-foot dairy barn that was all converted over into a store. And from like 1991 onwards, like my dad built a ice rink in the basement of it. We had poured concrete floors down there. So we had boards up and we had an ice rink. So my whole childhood is like all winter looking forward to having like, so from the red line to the blue line and as wide as the rink, indoor ice rink. So I just honed in my hockey skills and my slap shot for, hours and hours and hours. So I have a lot of fond memories doing that.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, that sounds like way better socialization than I had. Like, God, I still suck at talking to people. I guess that's not entirely true. But no, that's really cool. Were you gonna say, Nathan?
I just find the irony of you not being good at talking to people while being a professional podcaster.
Yeah,
there's a certain irony to it, I think.
Professional.
But I get that. I'm also, a de facto professional podcaster. I'm fucking terrible talking to anyone. Should have heard me try and order coffee earlier. I just kind of stumbled all over it.
No, that's me off air. Fucked. I'm like,
yeah,
people,
same.
People, I don't know how to talk to those.
Words?
Yes.
No, I'm a total retard.
Yeah,
it just doesn't work.
This is my socialization.
I figured you were going to say something about hockey. I said hockey, so I thought the Canadian was going to park up. But
no, he's not into sports at all, regardless of being from Canada.
I mean, I've been to Canada.
I'm into sports. Yes, Cristiano Ronaldo. I totally know who that
God,
is.
It hurts to hear you try and say his name. But
he's the hockey guy, right?
Oh my God.
What was that team you really like? Forza Milan?
Oh my gosh.
I'm also an artist and it still offends me. So
yes, bread and circuses.
Not only do you kind of like come from that background of straight edge and stuff, but you brought that into your company and your kind of brand's identity too. And I think the first thing I saw from you was the Keep Racism Out of Gun Culture T-shirt.
Yeah, somehow that has been a controversial T-shirt.
Yeah, that was exactly it. So when I saw that,
How
it was
the fuck
like,
is that controversial?
It seems like the most fucking basic thing of human decency one could think, but somehow it's controversial. And I just, we had a lot of hate from it when we first started doing it. And I just told a few people, I'm like, bro, if this triggers you, then
good.
Maybe get a reality check with what's going on in your brain.
Yeah. So that was the thing. Like, I mean, you could have just been a Kydex, holster company and done all of that and kept it, maybe, straight edge kind of accent, but to go kind of a little bit more full bore, although I guess that wasn't the intention. It was fairly innocuous, and then it turned into a point of contention. But you guys also have the, the black flag patch, the Hoist the Black Flag, just black PVC patch. So there was a few choices that I've seen that kind of, you're saying something. So what was the thought process behind that? So
like growing up in the 90s, like you kind of guessed, I grew up in like a libertarian, voluntarist kind of household. That's kind of like the political leanings of my parents. Which obviously, like, I think it meant something a little bit different in the 90s to be a libertarian than it does today. But, that's kind of my upbringing. And then my dad definitely, like, kind of started getting fed up the longer it went on, like, fed up with just mainstream politics and how, people would just use it to their own advantage. And, like, at the end of the day, like, most politicians really don't give a shit about you or me. So, he definitely dabbled in, like, voluntarism. Heavy and anarchism a little bit, which obviously, as we know, like a couple years ago when, Trump said, the anarchists and the agitators, like that really fucking like, people who don't read or anything were like, oh my God, you know what I mean? It just became this fucking big deal. And the reality is like, if you dive into the theory of it, most people who are, anti-Fed or want to kind of keep to themselves and, have the U.S. government as little in their lives as possible. Like there's a whole bunch of those bullet points that you're going to agree with. So as far as like the flag patch that we did, like we did it for a couple reasons. So we can get into this as well, soon or whatever. But like the majority of my adulthood, I've been working on ships overseas. I started as a deckhand, worked as a bosun, I worked as a rib operator, all the way up. I went through school and I was chief officer on board 150-foot patrol vessels off the coast of Africa. So I was doing that. And so like, there's always this running joke with me personally that's like, oh, I was a pirate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was a pirate on the sea. So obviously like black flags and pirates, there's a little bit of that element. But then of course, like we are a company that's like, obviously, we don't stand for racism. That's one of our pillars that we kind of stand for is like, no oppression is good oppression in a sense. You know what I mean? Like, so I want to live my life freely. And I don't think anyone else or the government should tell me how to live my life. And especially if I'm not causing harm to others. I mean, that's a big one, right? It's fucking common sense. So that black flag patch kind of like represents that as well. And it definitely pays homage to guerrilla struggles all throughout history. Spanish Civil War, YPG in Syria, fighting against ISIS, things like that as well. So it definitely pays homage to that. And then like, obviously like there's like that joke that's like what show is that called? It's Parks and Rec. Has anyone seen Parks and Rec?
Yeah.
So yep. Like
I always said earlier, child labor laws are ruining this country, but I didn't want to interrupt your flow.
Right. So like there's I can't remember his name in the show, but like the Indian dude who he starts that company, and then he creates the black on black business card that has there's no writing on it, and he's like, oh, this is gonna be the new thing, So we obviously all those important reasons that I said for the patch as well, but I thought it'd be funny to create a black out PVC patch because no one else makes them. No one else I'd never seen that before. So I was like, hey, it's a cool idea. This means something to me. It's going to mean something to like the people who want to buy it or whatever. And I was like, we're just going to black it out. And like, I sent off the proofs, to get the patches made, and they wrote back and they're like, I think that you sent the wrong design.
Like, no, this 200 of these.
And I was like, no, I need a lot of these. And that's
what did the patch say?
No, it literally says nothing. It's just a black flag.
Oh.
And
thanks for coming back, Nathan.
I had to use the little boys' room.
What the hell's on your camera? There you
go. It's this weird thing. I just I didn't want anyone to watch me going to the bathroom.
You piss in the corner of your room?
Yes, of course. Don't you?
I pissed like 3 times just sitting here.
I have several large 2-liter bottles, and occasionally someone will mistake it for apple juice. It's not. It's piss.
Well, damn, I respect the efficiency. But the black flag thing, so I was curious about that, because way back when I first came across you, I saw the shirt and I saw the flag, and I was like, well, I kind of want to buy a holster from this guy if he's selling black flags, but I wonder what he means. Yeah. Because it could, like you said, it could mean a million things.
Right.
But I was like, hey, take my money.
And I think it's definitely one of those things that like it gets used all the time for various reasons. Just in like more mainstream gun culture and within companies, it's kind of like it's that whole like hoist the, sometimes there's a time, and I don't disagree, that it's time to roll up your sleeves, hoist the black flag, and start slitting throats, right? That's like a famous quote that goes along with it. So, I mean, that can be applied to many.
I like that quote. It's cute.
Yeah, it's cute. It's nice. So it's, there's obviously a lot of things that could be applicable to it, but those reasons that I listed off, it definitely comes from that upbringing that I had and those morals and values that I was shown and taught through my the role models that I had as parents all through the 90s. So that really that's kind of pays homage to them, as well as, like I said, we named our company Guerrilla Tactical. Guerrilla fighters all over the world, in a smaller unit, fighting against mainstream forces with guerrilla tactics. Like, it's something I'm interested in. So it pays homage to, all those struggles like that as well.
I love that.
Yeah. So because there's a lot of holster companies that will kind of just be a holster company, and it's kind of boring. You, on the other hand, decided to be like, I'm going to be a holster company, but I'm also going to have a message. I'm going to have a purpose, and it's going to be more than just making, Kydex holsters. You mentioned earlier when you were talking about the black flag patch, where it was kind of like, yeah, this is something I would enjoy, so other people are going to enjoy it too. I relate to that a lot. I think that's something that a lot of people kind of neglect. It's more, well, what are other people going to like? Let's just do that, as opposed to having that confidence to be like, no, I like this. This is who I am. Maybe some people are going to disagree. Maybe I'll get some shit for it, but I'm going to keep doing it. Has that kind of always been the approach for your company since the beginning, where you're just going to be unique in yourselves, or, was there growing pains with that to get to that? How did that come to be?
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of approached everything in life that way. I wake up in the morning, I can look at myself in the mirror and I can know that I'm like happy with the choices that I've made and the things that I do. Am I going to rub people the wrong way? Are we going to rub people the wrong way with certain things? Sure, absolutely. We already have. From all over the spectrum. It doesn't matter. It doesn't, from all over the political spectrum in the U.S., we rub people the wrong way. But that's fine, because I am not here to make everybody happy. I'm here to do something that I wake up in the morning, I go to work. I own my own business, obviously, so work is different for me. It is a passion now, which I'm fortunate to say. But I'm excited to do what we do. I'm excited for the future with what we do. I'm excited to continue to build the brand. And yeah, sure, are we going to lose supporters along the way because of a decision we make? I'm sure we will. But at the end of the day, like, I'm not trying to appeal to every single person. I'm trying to appeal to me and those who, believe in whatever message that we're trying to convey. So at the end of the day, like, I think I'm a pretty cool person. I have a pretty cool story. I hope we're able to uncover a lot of that story in this podcast. And everyone can make their own decision about me as a person individually. But as a company, we have high standards, and we want to continue to push those standards on this industry. And we have big goals and big dreams with the company as well at this point. So, I mean, that's what we're working towards. And like, at the end of the day, like, we're going to do what we think is right. And if you are following along and you're into it, then good. If not, then go buy a fucking holster from someone else, because there's like 25 major companies out there you can buy from. But I do think that if you don't have a message and you don't stay true to that message, then your brand support and your trust in your brand and name does waver, because people don't know what to expect, and they don't know, if you're just trying to win over every single person out there, then you lose a little of that integrity, I think.
I think what makes companies like yourself and a lot of, relatively newer companies so successful so quickly is that they do have a personality, and they have something beyond a product and a brand. I think there's a lot of old existing companies and old brands that are used to marketing before social media and, kind of this worshiping of, like celebrities and all these other things have become more popular. And it's why a lot of companies are dying, for starters. They're not adapting. But what is making, like T-Rex Arms, for example, more than just a holster company? They have personality, and whether you like that personality or not, they have something more on top of just holsters. What you're doing, you have a personality, you're putting out a message. It's more than just holsters. And whether people agree with you or disagree with you, there's incredible value to adding that personality and adding that message that I think a lot of companies are going to end up having to adapt or die, that have been around for a very, very long time. Is that something deliberate? Because you mentioned that it was kind of just natural. You just want to be yourself. You want to do that. Is that something that you deliberately thought of when you looked at competition, or was it just purely as genuine as, this is who I am, so I'm just going to be myself?
I think that when it comes to marketing your brand, it's super important. I would even go as far to say it's of the utmost important to stick to your personality and stick to the message that you want to convey. And, like, give credit where credit's due. Like you said, with T-Rex Arms, they've completely changed the way that companies within this industry market themselves. When they started, media wasn't how it is today, and it's so easy now to start a company up or whatever, and they kind of pioneered that, to be fair. So when we started Guerrilla Tactical, one of the things that we knew for a fact was that we wanted to utilize social media and put out high quality photos, videos, information, whatever we can do. We wanted to assist in building that brand and brand trust with the content that we put out as well, which works right into the personality. Because I think that I'm sure you've all seen the page. I think we do a pretty good job at kind of gripping the hardened scenery of the Pacific Northwest. And that's where we are. We're a Pacific Northwest based company. So we really try to pull from those like lush, heavy greens and browns and earthy tones to build that structure on that page to make things pop. Because the reality is, like, pictures of Kydex holsters are super boring. Like marketing holsters is super boring. So, it's one thing if we had 150,000 followers and we've been in business for 10 years or whatever the fuck, like, then it would be different. We could post pictures of holsters and people would, you'd get low engagement, but it wouldn't matter because your percentages would be so high that you'd be making tons of sales. But now as we are growing our brand, I think we're sitting at like 26,000 followers or something right now. It's like of the utmost importance to, I believe, stick to a message and continue to work with that personality, because me personally, I have this personality and I'm selling myself to you as the owner of the company, and take it or leave it. You know what I mean? And I think that I am what I would consider a good person. And that's one of the things that we hope to convey through the company as well, is that we don't all have to get along. We don't all have to agree on everything. There are some common enemies out there, federal government. But that was for you, BR.
I was gonna say, Mitch is smiling silently, but he will not say anything. And this is all alleged. Yeah, but
that was no, but there are like the coming after our rights, the rights that we do have within the firearm space. But like, as far as we go, we want to market ourselves and market that personality for people to pick up and hopefully learn from it. Because ultimately, as the company grows, we hope to be a positive force to be able to help to shift, the gun culture that we live in. Obviously, there's a lot of like old, fuddy, outdated ideas about everything, about whether it be the way you train or the guns that you use or carry or the holster types or whatever, like all that stuff. I mean, medical is one of our biggest things as well. We sell a lot of medical. We're distributors for North American Rescue. They make our custom kits for us, and we ship a lot of that stuff. And that's great because from day one, I've never been a medical professional, but I've, all my work overseas I've done a million different medical trainings all over the world, militaries and whatnot. And that's one of my biggest things is I carry medical every day. And that was one of the things when we started the company, we wanted to make good quality holsters, but we also wanted to promote people being safe about it. If you the saying goes, if you can make holes, then you should be able to fix holes.
So they do say that you're a hell of a lot more likely to use medical on any given day than your concealed carry. But I know a lot of people who concealed carry every day and they don't even own a tourniquet or know how to use one.
Or know how to use one properly.
Yeah. Well, that's where these big cultural pushes are so important, where it's kind of like one-on-one with you guys, or at least it seemed when I first started following you. It was kind of like, oh, here's some medical stuff, here's some carrying stuff, here's some more medical, don't forget the medical, here's some more carrying. Medical's important, guys, and I appreciate that, because so often it's kind of like this tertiary thing. It's like you could be in complete civilian clothes anywhere in the world and have medical stuff on you, and it's going to be far more useful than a gun necessarily.
Absolutely.
But someone else with kind of those cultural pushes and what you're saying about promoting this stuff to whoever and kind of getting along despite politics and stuff is I've noticed kind of more of a push towards quote unquote leftist shooters from your company, and more kind of outreach, which is cool to see, because it's not a community that the vast majority of the firearms community would ever see. Like I might mess up their names, but Arm Your Friends and Yellow Peril Tactical, people like those groups who are reaching out to people who might never consider it something they could do to walk into a gun store and get a gun. It's just not even in their field of view for them. But they might be concerned about their safety. They might have a mistrust for police, whatever it might be.
Sure.
But no one's being like, hey, this is a cool class of chill people. You don't have to walk in and sign up for an NRA membership. There's people who will talk about this stuff to you who are, accessible. And has that been a big thing from the start with your company as well, to kind of be a little bit more involved for those groups? Or because that's just what I've noticed from the outside.
Well, one pet peeve I have is this rhetoric of anyone who's not a right-wing Republican is the. So I guess one of my pet peeves is when people, especially like conservative right, just call anyone who isn't them leftists, especially like Democrats and fucking liberals and shit like that. That's just annoying to me. It's just a personal pet peeve because I think it's misleading. Because there are a lot of people who wouldn't identify as right-wing or conservative in this country arming themselves and training very heavily. And in one of the things when we started Guerrilla Tactical was we recognized the vast majority, all of these people all over who are training for their own reasons, whether it's like you said, they feel unsafe in their community, or maybe because of the color of their skin, whatever that may be. And in my opinion, everybody who owns a gun and is responsible as a gun owner in this country helps all of us. So there are a lot of companies that kind of market themselves to one way or the other in this space. And I just don't know that, and I understand if, again, like whatever your beliefs, political beliefs may be, or whatever, like you say, stick to this market, that's my people or whatever, that's fine, whatever you want to do. But as far as Guerrilla Tactical, we sort of just want to be a positive space for anyone who wants to fucking own a gun and train and be responsible and better themselves.
Yeah.
I don't have to agree with everybody. I don't get into it with people like that. But I do recognize that like the more responsible gun ownership there is in this country, ultimately our rights as gun owners, it's safer. You know what I mean? And I think a few episodes ago, you guys talked about, with one of the T-Rex guys about gun ownership. And, they were in agreement that like even people that they would consider the enemy or whatever should own guns because like everyone should have that fundamental right. And, I agree that everybody should have that fundamental right to own guns. And I think that promoting responsible gun ownership and not limiting yourself to one particular niche market within the broader space is a better overall plan for the future.
Absolutely.
Maybe just me.
Nathan, tinfoil hat time.
Oh, Christ. All right.
Okay, it's not even that bad this time, and I'm sure everyone can agree to a certain, degree. Restricting gun ownership has never been partisan. It's always been done by kind of whoever it's more politically advantageous for. For example, the Republicans are the ones who, Reagan, 86 machine guns ban, NFA, all of that, specifically targeting the black community and the Black Panthers who were open carrying. I might be mixing my timelines up again. I'm a Canadian talking about American politics.
So I was going to mention this if no one else did, but yeah. So Reagan and the NRA in California were the ones who fucked up open carry, which is insane if you presented that historical fact to most, anyone who would have Reagan on their wall, they would be like, Reagan, my freedom, yeah. But because of the Black Panthers, like auditing police stops and making sure people weren't getting brutalized or wrongfully arrested, whatever it might be, they were like, all right, we can't have that anymore. It's inhibiting police doing their fine work out there, and so they pushed it right through to stop them being able to do that, and like you said, it's always whoever it's more politically advantageous for. It's not necessarily like a left or right thing to control gun control. It's a government thing.
Yes. No, absolutely. And I have no qualms at all thinking that, if the shoe was on the other foot, it would be, the right pushing for gun control if the narrative was slightly different. Just culturally, the pieces fell like they did. But one of the worst things that ever happened was gun control becoming a partisan issue. And hell, this leads to identity politics in general, is basically one of the big downfalls of our society.
Well, that's why I really like people sharing these lefty shooters as well, and lefty being, like you said, anything on the left or liberal, but people being like, oh wait, we both need to like learn more knowledge about this. We both have things to like, medical. There's so much common ground with just life-saving skills and stuff. It's like, well, maybe this is a good space to get beyond just, oh, we're in Camp A and Camp B or red and blue or whatever it might be, and just be people learning something together. I mean, you see it at shooting classes where you've got, wannabe militia guys sitting there shooting next to cops, and you're just kind of like, all right, yeah, we're all friends today.
Yep.
But
some dude's got the Boogaloo Boy patch on, and he's have to line up with whoever else. But
yeah, I know it's kind of a nice thing where I think because gun rights everyone feels the same boot when it's coming down on gun control, and everyone has the same the same issues with it. So and we all realize what it ultimately leads to for all of our different communities. Yeah. So it's kind of it's a nice right to rally to and kind of have some common ground with people from all over the spectrum, and that's what I really like to see from emerging companies kind of getting past that just stars and bars and good old boys gun club kind of deal.
Sure.
Yeah, I think. Well, we did a illustration about this. I looked into some history and I did some deep diving when we made it. There hasn't been any major gun control passed in the U.S. without a majority of Republican support since I think it was the early 1900s. I think was like the last time that happened without a majority of Republican support. So when I like when you bring things up where it's like, yeah, anybody, when we call people leftists, that's such a loose term nowadays where it's like, yeah, anybody that isn't like a hardcore Republican is a leftist now. And it's the same thing on the left where anybody who isn't like all of these hardcore left policies, you're a white supremacist, right-wing extremist or whatever. So when you start getting into that nuance and you start appealing to all of those people, I mean, everybody, I think, anybody can stumble across your page and they might be like, like I'm not interested in this stuff, but they have holsters. And they go like that. Maybe they fall down a rabbit hole like that. It's very important to reach as far and as wide as you can to people who are often discriminated against within these cultures. I mean, gun ownership isn't just a right-wing thing. It's not just a left-wing thing. It's not an up, down, left, right. It's an everybody thing. And when anybody and everybody does it, it's great. And we should be trying to, at least I think, reach those people. Maybe not every company does, but they still are for it, and that's fine. But I like seeing companies like yourself and other pages or people on social media that are kind of reaching that community that is so often turned away from gun ownership because it's viewed as this right-wing extremism thing where if you own a gun, you're this person that wants to go kill people.
Yeah. Well, that it's been a very easy way, and it's not just guns. It's kind of everything. If you like free speech, you are right wing. If you like, X, you're left wing. If you like Y, you are, a horrible anarchist that just wants to watch the world burn.
Woo!
People are comfortable when you put. People are comfortable when you put them in boxes based on beliefs. People need things to be simple and easy and binary. And that this is just one of those cases where, it's right-wing extremism. If you like this or if you wear a Hawaiian shirt or you like guns, then clearly you are a insurrectionist or, you're a right-wing lunatic. And I know so many people here who even buy into it.
Absolutely.
God, they're everywhere. It's, oh, you like guns? You must be a, horrific racist. And it's lazy. It's so lazy. And so much work goes into keeping this narrative going.
Well, in my experience, like growing up in upstate New York, in the rural upstate New York, and I'm sure Mitch can attest to this as well. I was fortunate to have a little bit of a unique upbringing with my situation. My sister and I did. A lot different than a lot of my friends up there. In the area I grew up in, it was struggling farmland. It was all these generational dairy farms that were going under and just trying to hang on with every last, bit that they could. And they really felt that heat from, Albany and New York City and different laws and legislation that came from there that really affected them. And I was fortunate to kind of get out of upstate New York at a quite early age because I still have friends there who work at the same convenience store and hang out with the same 5 people. And it's hard for you to grow your mind and grasp larger things in this world because it's a big world. There's a lot out there. And, grasp other concepts, have self-critique, all these things that are important for personal growth. It's hard when you're stuck with the same 5 people just talking the same shit all day long, every day for 20 years straight. So you can't, some of these people who have, whatever side you are on, the same ideas that are just regurgitated and passed down generation after generation. And that's problematic, I think, because people should be able to formulate their own opinions and, view the world through whatever scope they're able to, and then base their life decisions around that and whatever makes sense to them. But I do think that it's problematic when you only have one thing to go off of, like one, whether that be one group of friends or you're only surrounded by your family that's saying the same shit all the time. And you never really have the ability to, look at things and then formulate your own opinions on stuff. And I kind of have a unique life in that sense because, like, I've been to close to 40 different countries, and I spent almost 10 years working outside of the U.S. Overseas with hundreds of different people from different backgrounds. And I've been to every continent except for, South America. So it's like I've been able to I come back to the U.S. and I feel very fortunate and very privileged for what I have here. But I do view things through a little bit of a different lens, differently than some of my friends, let's say, that I grew up with in the 90s who still work at that same convenience store. I just think I have a little bit of a different outlook and I can see things through a little bit of a different scope. So it helps me in social situations and, new people I meet or running this business or talking to you 3 to be able to have a good conversation about stuff, without, one just getting stuck on one belief system or getting stuck on one track mind. So I think that's a really good way for people to kind of view things and go about their life.
I'm going to keep talking about New York because I love talking about New York.
Oh, Christ.
Let's reminisce.
You mentioned kind of you grew up. It sounds like we grew up very similar.
I was going to say, like, we've been having these conversations, like similar kind of things.
Even our adult lives. I mean, you worked outside of the U.S. longer than I worked outside of the U.S., but it sounds like we've had very, very similar, minus I went to public school and, some other nuances. One of the things that I have come to appreciate a bit is how vastly different everybody's beliefs were in my hometown versus the beliefs and ideas that people from New York City would bring up. I've come to appreciate it more because I've learned to respect different perspectives just from that, even though I inherently disagree with them. I have come to respect and look at that other viewpoint. I still have friends. I think I told this story before. Stewart's gas station? We have one in my little small town.
Of course.
Stewart's is great, by the way. If you're in New York, like, Stewart's is the fucking bomb.
Those root beers.
It's great.
Like 10 people are getting this reference.
Listen, it's great. But I still have people that I went to school with that graduated before me that worked as a cashier at that Stewart's. And I will go home and visit family and I'll stop and get gas. And they're still there doing the same thing. And much like yourself, I've come to view the world, and I think all of us have. We've all traveled. We've all lived in different countries. We've all done different things, and we can kind of view the world now and view different perspectives and view how we grew up and reflect on it. And, it's something that I recommend to anybody who lives or grew up in a very small, or even like a city. If you grew up in like a city and that's all you know, like go somewhere else and get out of that mindset. And I think you'll be a more well-rounded individual, and you're able to have conversations with people that you disagree with.
Absolutely.
And that's something that, a little controversial, I think, but I come to appreciate New York City for at least giving me that at a young age.
Yeah, and I don't think it has to be controversial either. I mean, it's kind of how you look at it. I think you brought up some really valid and good points about that. And the reality is that there are good places and bad places all over the world. And that can be applied to the United States, and that can be applied to every reach of the world, right? And at the same token, there are good people and bad people in every part of the world as well. And I've met many of both sides. And that's just part of life.
I'm God, just you bringing up Stewart's reminded me of the Popeyes story in New Jersey, the one in Elizabeth, New Jersey, where all the terrible people are around. And because we got a lot of, every time we bring up a place, we always get a bunch of messages from people who go and visit it and go like, hey, this place that you mentioned in this particular episode of the podcast, I was there. I don't know why, that just popped into my head. It's pretty irrelevant to what we're talking about. But
well, you are gonna get like 5 messages from people like, "Hey, I'm at the gas station."
Yeah, the root beer is really good. Actually,
someone's gonna walk up and take a picture of the cashier and be like, "Is it this guy? Is this the guy who hasn't done shit for 20 years?"
Just
like,
loser?
Fuck. Yeah.
They're gonna be like, this place sucks. What is wrong?
Yeah, it's like, you fucking lied to me, Mitch, you piece of shit. Fuck you. The root beer was bad, actually.
Yeah.
Everything from Stewart's is great. I don't care. The breakfast sandwiches are one of the things that I miss most about that place, but I'm not gonna completely reminisce about upstate New York because, for as
come on, Mitch, we know you want to.
Well, as awful as, I think a lot of the laws and restrictions are, if you could remove all of those, I would love it. I would absolutely love it.
It's very beautiful.
Yeah, that's kind of the funny thing about how that works. Like, Australia would be really cool if you could, just remove all the laws and the things that make it suck.
I don't know, dude. It's still a giant desert island.
I live
full
for 9
of
months.
Everything wants to kill you, but it's really pretty.
I lived in Australia.
People
for
are really
9 months.
nice. They swear a lot. But I don't know. Therein lies the problem. Like, I think I would like a lot of Canada if, the laws didn't suck and the government was really shitty. But the problem is...
Do you think you'd stay?
Nah, fuck it. Fuck this place. This place sucks. I think I would less dislike this place, more just like America more. But that being said, again, like, and I don't want to say like, oh, politics is so important. Oh, the laws are, you can choose to ignore them. You can choose to get by, but it does feel oppressive when you live somewhere that is just fundamentally unaligned with your beliefs and wants to, kill you or put you in a hole for having an inanimate object or a plant. It does really wear on you. So
that's the modern human condition, buddy.
Yep. The Industrial Revolution and its consequences.
This episode is brought to you by Dylan Precision. If you're looking to get into reloading, precision loading, or just, maybe saving some money whenever the price of primers and powder come down, you should look into getting a Dylan press. They make awesome presses. I've never heard anything bad about them. I got one myself now, and I'm really excited to start loading on it. So huge thanks to Dylan Precision for sponsoring this episode.
So, the pirate stuff. I mean, we haven't really like dived into it, but like,
let's do that.
So, how did you get into that lifestyle from growing up the rural homesteading life, and then presumably going down to Texas and doing some 20-year-old stuff? How does one get onto boats? Was that kind of like the transition period, like the 20s to the boat stuff?
Yeah. So I think that I was living in Texas from like 19 or 20 to like 22. It was better part of 3 years. Obviously the relationship failed. Not with that person anymore. So at least one of my exes is from Texas. So I was down there. I was a grocery buyer for Whole Foods Market for a while, like for the Southwest region. So that was interesting. I was like in management, and I just was pretty miserable. Like I found myself like coming home from work and just being like, okay, there's got to be much more out there. Like this is fucking boring. So I was kind of fantasizing about like traveling the world or like doing something more unique and just getting out of that situation. And about that time, my girlfriend at the time had taken on a new job that was going to move her to LA. And I was like, I will not be moving to LA. So we decided to, we were all adult about it. We decided to break up. So I got this idea that I could join, like, so I knew some people who were working overseas with an organization called Sea Shepherd Global. And I don't know if you're familiar with Sea Shepherd Global at all.
I don't know anything about all of this world, and I'm super interested because I was fascinated with this kind of space when I was younger, but
yeah. So directly kind of coming from the hardcore music scene, I knew friends who had gone and joined these ships that they were going like these fucking, DIY crews, manning these ships and going to Antarctica and like fucking up Japanese whalers, I was like, that shit sounds hard as fuck. You know what I mean? Like I was like, this sounds way better than like buying groceries for Whole Foods. So I like hit up a few people that I knew that were kind of doing that thing. And I was like, so what if I like sell all my shit and like come to Australia and like join one of these ships? And they're like, oh, it's pretty hard to get on or whatever. I didn't know much about it at the time, but I was like, yo, that shit sounds awesome. So I was like, Antarctica? Like, yeah, I want to go there. So I ended up working my way through, talking to the right people, broke up with my girlfriend at the time, sold my car, sold all my shit, and then like ended up getting a flight to Australia and moving down to Melbourne for like better part of almost a year, and like jumping on one of these ships and like getting it ready. Like it was a 150-foot patrol vessel, and we were like getting it all ready to go to the Southern Ocean. We didn't really know what the campaign was going to be or whatever. I didn't even know if I would stick around. I just was like a young kid, like with my backpack, and that's all. Like no carefree, when it was easy, Yeah. So I went down to Australia, jumped on one of these ships. It was pretty cool. There was a bunch of like almost everybody was like ex-hardcore kid. There was other like straight edge people there and stuff. So that was pretty cool. And then they were like, hey, we're going to go to Antarctica. Do you want to go? And I was like, hell yeah. And I actually ended up being, there was a bunch of people that didn't get asked to go, and only 4 of us got asked to join the crew and go down there. So I thought that was pretty cool. So we went to Tasmania, and then we went down to Antarctica, and before you know it, we're doing these fishing patrols, working alongside Interpol, for searching for some purple notice illegal fishing vessels down there.
So can I just pause you for a second, because I'm wondering like what the job kind of like, what kind of level you guys are operating at if you're kind of being patrols and security, because that can mean that strikes everything from going out and being like the bouncer of the seas to outright like fucking up Somalian pirates kind of level stuff. Yeah. So what was the kind of job?
So
because most of these guys are like ex-military from what I know of.
Yeah. So this was originally a grassroots organization that started in the late 70s, and kind of evolved from there. So when I went down there, it was like a ragtag bunch of like fucking hardcore kids who somehow took a ship. I mean, they had some professional crew, but that was one of the cool things about it. I was like, somehow we're taking this ship to iceberg-infested Antarctica, like fuck up some illegal fishing vessels. I was like, get down, I'm down. What are we gonna do? Cut some nets, throw some fucking smoke bombs and shit. I'm down, So we went down there to cause a ruckus, and we ended up, it turned very professional quickly, and we picked up one of these illegal fishing vessels down there that was like this notorious vessel called Thunder. And there's actually a documentary about this whole thing and a whole TV series about it on Discovery Channel now.
Oh, damn.
So we went down there and we picked up this vessel, and we stuck with that vessel, and it became the world's record longest maritime hot pursuit. We chased this vessel and physically stopped it from fishing for 110 days at sea. So we started in Australia, Southern Ocean, South Indian Ocean, around the Cape in South Africa, and up the west coast of Africa. And ultimately, after 110 days, this fishing vessel sunk their own ship on the high seas to get rid of evidence and try to escape. What was ultimately going to happen is they were going to get arrested and processed, and they were going to be in deep shit for all the crimes they had committed on the ocean, right? So we were the only vessel out there. It was the job. This is really the job of the Australian government, but they didn't do shit. So we went down there and filled that void where there's no law enforcement at sea, and that was the kind of the name of that mission then, which turned into much more because we ended up working with Interpol. We found this vessel that they'd been looking for about, I think, the better part of 10 years, and we found it. And then because of that and the work that we did, it led to 5 other major arrests and shutdowns of other illegal purple notice Interpol wanted vessels. So this gained a bunch of attention. And then before you know it, we start working with contractors in West African countries, and we get offered as the organization to take our ships and crews there to do joint patrolling efforts with West African militaries and train them on seamanship, boarding, rib operations, and inspections and arrests of vessels within their economic, water zones. So that's how I went from being a fucking punk kid going to Antarctica to becoming a professional seafarer, training West African militaries on how to board and inspect vessels. So
I was so curious.
The level of professionalism between, let's say, 2014 when I first joined the ship and 2016 when we did our late 2015 jumped up like dramatically. So we had like professional crews on board, and all of us all of a sudden were ticketed, professional seafarers picking up these West African militaries. We worked with Gabon, Liberia, Sao Tome, Principe, and the Gambia primarily. That's where I worked, and we picked up their navies and we picked up their Marines, and we would do joint operations for months at a time in their economic water zones. So that's where I spent the better part of 6 years working directly with training and capacity building missions with West African militaries. So.
Damn.
For starters, I have so many questions, but we're going to go back a bit.
Let's start.
When you say you stopped the ship, what does that mean? Like
I just imagine a bunch of hardcore kids like, just fucking going wild.
So they were illegally fishing in protected waters around the Antarctica, around Antarctica, the continent. Most of those areas are protected sanctuaries because it's such a delicate ecosystem. So a lot of these, because of that, there's no ship traffic down there, very little. And a lot of these illegal fishing vessels will go down there and exploit that. Because at the same time that there's not a lot of other vessels and it's teeming with wildlife and teeming with the fish that they want to catch, there's also no law enforcement or policing of those waters. So it's a very easy kind of loophole for them to go down there and get the good stuff without any legal ramifications. So they had been operating in that area for, I think, 8 years with no ramifications whatsoever. So that's why we kind of filled that void. But when I say we stopped the ship, we physically would put our patrol vessel in their path to stop them from fishing and or cut their nets and haul their shit on and steal their gear from them. So as well as we had 2 rigid-hulled inflatable boats, ribs on the military ribs on the ship, and we did various actions with the ribs as well to physically stop them from breaking the law.
Are you armed?
At that time, none of us were armed. When we started working with the contracting organizations and West African militaries, then those personnel were armed on board.
So are they armed?
They were just fishing. They were just fishermen it was a Spanish fishing company. And then they had mostly Filipino crew, which is its own set of problems. Like there's a lot of human trafficking and different things like that go on with these Asian crews. They'll like bring on young boys and stuff, and they get abused and they don't get paid, and all sorts of human rights violations. But that's like a topic for another day. But yeah,
what I'm trying to understand, let's say I'm in charge of this ship that is, hunting, fishing illegally, doing all these things. People are messing with my bottom line. You guys are. You're interrupting my fishing. You're blocking me from doing shit. There's nobody around. You're fucking with my money. Absolutely. I'm going to have guns. I'm going to be armed and get the fuck out of my way.
So
how does that work?
So fortunately, they were not armed. No one used any sort of actual firearms against us when we were in Antarctica that time. But they did try to ram our vessel. They did try to cut us off. They tried to use their ship as a battering ram on multiple occasions, as well as they improvised slingshots and slung heavy big nuts and bolts and all sorts of crazy shit at us as well. So they tried to get violent, but they didn't have firearms per se. Maybe, coming from Europe, they have access to a shotgun or something, but it wasn't like they were, kitted out with AR-15s or anything like that. So that was to our advantage.
So while this shit's happening, they're ramming into your fucking boat, are there people like yourself and their crew looking at each other while this whole thing is going on?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was gonna say, no one in the 21st century, that we've talked to, has ever really dealt with, ship to ship combat or some shit, which is,
So fortunately, the level of professionalism on our bridge allowed us to avoid imminent collision. We were able to avoid collision by maneuvering our counter movements against their movements. So no ship actually struck each other at sea, which would have been extremely problematic because they had a big steel vessel. We had a big steel vessel. Being out in the middle of the ocean, hitting each other, tearing holes in the side of your hull, it never ends well. So we're very fortunate, and they're also very fortunate that no attempt from them to ram us actually worked, but they did try. And I do believe that some of it was a scare tactic, but it didn't really scare us. We were committed.
Well, I guess that's the magnitude of this and the craziness of this. If I am the operator of that ship, or I'm the owner of whatever business or whoever is in charge of this, and I know, because I've kind of felt it out, okay, they're going to move their ship. Okay, so I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. You can drive your little boat around me and do whatever you want. You can cut my nets. I'll get more nets, but if you start damaging my property and you continuously cut my nets, I'm going to get fucking pissed, and I'm going to start protecting that shit. I'm going to have my own little patrol boats out there, and it turns into a literal, how does this not turn into a literal armed conflict?
So at this point, we're multiple days away from the closest land. So they only have X amount of equipment. Also, we were in extremely rough seas for a lot of this. So when you're in really rough seas, you really can't physically or safely fish properly. So there was only a couple of occasions where we had to physically stop them. And that was simply because they were breaking the law. We weren't just out there just for the fun of it. There was a reason behind actually putting a stop to this. And we warned them before. He said, hey, if you are going to continue to fish illegally, we will forcibly stop your fishing operation. And that's why ultimately around the little islands of Sao Tome and Principe in Western Africa off the coast of Gabon, at the end of this 10-day chase, you could call it, they scuttled their own ship and sunk their entire 67-meter vessel, and we had to rescue all 40 of their crew on the high seas in their life rafts because they knew they were in such trouble because they were had been operating this way for so long that they needed to get rid of the evidence in hopes that they wouldn't be able to get processed. It didn't really work out too well for them. We rescued their crew, all of their their illegal workers kind of went back to their home in Southeast Asia, and then 4 of their officers got processed and did 3 years in prison, I think, on the island of Sao Tome. for crimes on the high seas. So to go back to your point quickly and touch on that about why were they not armed and protecting it and more so, I think because they had been operating for such a long time untouched, this was a total surprise for them. They didn't expect us to be there. They didn't expect any ship to be there. They'd been operating this way for so many years, completely alone out there doing whatever they want to do, that they probably did not think that they needed any reason to protect their ship or to, have any tools to get violent in that sense.
So, because I've seen things on the Discovery Channel, it might have been the thing that you were a part of, I don't know, but I remember I would watch like these, there's even a South Park episode about stopping the whalers, the Japanese whalers. Like I've seen these clips and I've seen, episodes. Eventually they have to figure out like we should probably arm ourselves because they probably look at you guys as a fucking nuisance because the governments aren't doing shit.
Right.
Like you guys aren't the government. So they're like, what fucking authority do these people have? Sure, I'm breaking the law, but who the fuck cares? Like,
right.
I'm out here. Nobody's stopping me except for these people. At what point, have you heard of any instances where they were armed and something happened?
Well, probably more along the African coast, right?
Yeah. So out on the high seas, like down in Antarctica, no. The Japanese whaling fleet every year was getting more and more equipped, and they did announce that they would be going down with armed personnel from the Japanese military. So that's not something that was ever encountered again, but that was a threat by them. As far as this fishing vessel goes, no. And that this fishing vessel is now sitting at 4,000 feet below the surface and never to be used again. So we don't really have to worry about that. But when we transitioned our objectives and started doing capacity building missions with contractors and the West African militaries, then we did encounter some ships with some weaponry on board, but also we had armed personnel doing the boardings with our boarding officers and, kind of going through everything. So there was an element of risk there, but I think that any of these illegal fishing vessels would have been pretty stupid to try to pull a gun out because they would have just gotten mowed down by an AK. So
this whole thing is wild to me. Like before we even get to Africa, I'm still caught on this whole fishing and whaling thing. The Japanese government sends their military and says, if you guys try to stop us from illegally fishing, like we have armed people here that will like sink your ships or shoot you or like it.
Yeah, I mean, whatever that means, it's never been tested, so it could totally just be a threat.
And the rest, but this is illegal according to who? Like, who made this illegal?
So there's protected waters all around. There's sanctuaries all around the continent of Antarctica because the ecosystems down there are some of the last untouched places on this planet. So they have been deemed by the Australian government, New Zealand government to be a protected waters. So because of that, the Japanese whaling fleets go down there and they have an X amount of quota for whales. And what they've done over the years is that because they've gone under the guise of scientific research, and that's allowed them to, fish X amount of, kill X amount of whales because it's for scientific research, quote unquote. But the reality is they're just taking the meat back to Japan and selling it and consuming it, as well as just continuing on a tradition that they've done for many years. So there's some claims to be said that the Antarctic Treaty is coming up soon for renegotiation, and countries like Japan have a stake in that treaty. So a lot of people say that if Japan continues to go down there and whale each year, even if they don't really get any whales, they're able to stake a claim and say, hey, we've been operating in this area for the last 30 years or whatever, and no one else is. So when the treaty comes up to be re-signed, we think we should get a piece of this ocean, essentially. And Japan has a very large, fishing fleet. But China actually, and China is what we deal with a lot on the west coast of Africa. They have the largest fleet of fishing vessels outside of Chinese waters in the world.
So it's New Zealand and Australia that are saying it's illegal. It's illegal to fish here and whale here. It's those two countries.
I mean, there's an agreed upon committee of different countries that have a stake in this Antarctica treaty. A lot of these countries utilize Antarctica for research, for various things. They have base camps on the continent. So all of these countries have a say in it, and they say that all the water around Antarctica should be protected, and here's why. So it's not everywhere, but there's certain sanctuaries around the continent of Antarctica.
And is there any of them governments, not you and what you were doing, are there any of these governments that are being like, these are protected waters, so we're going to protect these waters? Or is it just people like yourself?
So that was one of the things. For years, these areas were being exploited because the governments that are supposed to be policing these waters were not doing their job. It costs a lot of money to take a ship down there, to fly a plane over, all those things. So a lot of these countries, they were like, yeah, it's really important that we keep these places protected, and here's why, but like we're not really ready to like put any money into it. So that's why some of the organizations like, I've worked with before have kind of filled that void in that gap in law enforcement down there. However, sometimes the Australian Navy will send patrol vessels down there for a few days, or they might do a couple flyovers that last, a number of hours. And that's kind of like their entire patrol for the year. So to answer your question, not really.
Yeah, no, you guys fucking earned calling that black flag patch the, hoist the black flag patch, doing actual pirate shit on your own, and doing some vigilante stuff, because I mean, if no one else is doing it. But this all strikes me kind of in the same vein as the all of the volunteer work with the park rangers down in Africa.
Absolutely.
And is there any kind of I know you said like a few organizations, but is there any good organizations people can kind of like follow or donate to or whatever, or support that's doing these kind of operations still?
Yeah, I mean, for as far as organizations like kind of in the same vein of what we're talking about here, Sea Shepherd is what I worked for a bunch of years, so it's worth checking out. They do a bunch of stuff all over, primarily working with African countries, doing capacity building with the militaries there now, which is the main focus for illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. So essentially, Chinese ships and European Union ships are coming down, and they're primarily hunting tuna. And they're buying licenses for pennies on the dollar from all the coastal African countries, and then they're just following the tuna up and down the coast and just taking away all the locals' livelihood. Mm. So Africa, many countries in Africa are struggling, whether there be conflict or from civil war or just, from trying to set up their infrastructure. And so when you dangle a carrot in front of these countries, they're just happy. They're say, okay, cool. Like we could really use that $1 million or whatever. And then these fishing vessels are coming down there and just raking their waters, and they're taking, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of fish, and none of it's getting landed on African soil. So they're getting exploited in a big way, and they don't really have the financial ability, a lot of these coastal countries, to have their own patrol vessels that can go any further out than maybe 2 days sail. So that's why we're bringing our vessels in and bringing their crews on board with us, because some of the ships that we have the ability to be at sea for 6 months without going back to land. I mean, massive fuel capacities.
It sounds like anarchy out there. And I don't mean that in the sense where it's like fucking literal chaos, but it sounds very much like, hey, this is a bad thing that they're doing. We're going to go stop them from doing that bad thing.
Yeah. And essentially that's it. Like, people like our organization have taken it upon ourselves to take matters into our own hands. It's like the whole thing, right? Like, to bring it down on a much smaller scale, like in my immediate area, there was a bunch of potholes in the road, and no one wanted to fucking fix the potholes. No one wanted to fix it. And everyone was like, well, this sucks to drive here. So we got together with our neighbors and we fucking went out and fixed the potholes. And now it's great to drive. So it's like, I think that
sounds like something Mitch got arrested for.
Wait,
is there a story here?
I haven't heard this one.
I didn't get arrested, but I will say,
I was like, Mitch got arrested.
I've
What?
never been arrested.
Okay, I thought you got arrested. Maybe harassed by police is more apt.
No, I'm curious for you now, because was this pothole thing in New York?
No, this was in Washington.
Okay.
It sucks everywhere.
Yeah, it sucks everywhere.
My God, you can basically stand up in the potholes here.
roads.
Those highways around Chicago, though, the worst.
So in New York, I think I've told this story before too, but you might get some entertainment out of this being from similar area. The potholes were fucking terrible.
Absolutely.
And we never had a highway superintendent in my little town, because we're like it was a position, but nobody ever ran. Nobody ever like it was just vacant. And for years, every summer, if you were like a kid in the town, it was your job, where all the family was kind of like pull money together and you would fill potholes. And that's what you did. And it was the same thing with plowing the roads and literally maintaining the roads. Like that's just what you did. One year, this woman ran unopposed and she won with something like stupid low. Like it was less than 100 votes. And she ended up winning because she ran unopposed. And people, were just filling potholes or, plowing or doing whatever. And she was like, that's not your role to do. And she started to send the police out to stop people from filling potholes and plowing the roads. And we're like, okay, well, like, are you going to take care of the potholes? Yeah, totally. We're going to plow the roads. We're going to do all these things, blah, blah. Like, okay, cool. And then it never happened. And the roads are terrible. And there was no way to make that position vacant again, but nobody wanted to run. So it just kept being her for so long until, I don't know if she's still in that position. She very well might be.
Maybe she died.
To this very day, she sits on her ass and collects
She
a paycheck.
very well might be. I don't know. But like nobody wanted to run against her because nobody wanted the position, because nobody needed the position. It was just like an official thing like, hey, like this position exists and nobody does it. And it was fine. Like, sure, there were potholes, but they got fixed. So I don't know, not to get back on New York again, but it's fucking stupid.
Well, that's the whole thing. It's like people want to take action, like for a more positive thing, let them take action. And then, I mean, that's my analogy with the pothole thing, is that like our small community of neighbors came together and fixed something that the state refused to fix. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's no different than on a much larger scale, like what we did in Antarctica or what we did in West Africa, that there's no one else, filling this void that's needed. So a group of people got together and they said, well, shit, we can do this. Let's get together and DIY this thing. And then now it's grown into a very professional organization that world leaders and governments look to for advice on illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing. So it just shows like, some people with like-minded goals and a little bit of hard work can get out there and make a big difference, a big impact.
Yeah. To get on that point, and also what you said earlier, Mitch, about, it sounds like anarchy out there, and not like the Molotov throw and black bloc kind, but just something that I hear a lot. There's anarchy between governments, and that is true. Like, they have their councils and stuff to come together and stuff, but ultimately, if one country decides to throw a rocket into the next, like, there's nothing that can be done. It's that's just what it is. And the same thing between when there is no state actor there, whether it's on the micro or macro. Like, if the power goes out and you're 3 hours from cops, it's down to you, buddy. And same thing with something like this, like whether it's the potholes or stopping poaching or illegal fishing and stuff. If there's no one out there to do it, or if it's their job and it's not getting done, it comes down to people.
Which, to kind of tie this a little bit back into Guerrilla Tactical, one of our biggest things is heightening a certain level of self-sufficiency, self-reliancy, and general preparedness. So obviously we're a holster manufacturing company as well as a medical supply company in a sense, and a little bit of training thrown in there as well. But one of the things that I do in my everyday life, and I promote it to other people, is to be prepared and self-sufficient and self-reliant. Because at the end of the day, like you said, you might need to do something, or something is happening in your area, and there is no, 911 gets called and no one's going to come. You know what I mean? So it's like that kind of goes into the whole thing of learning medical and firearms as well, but also other skills, and that's one of the things that we promote through the Guerrilla Tactical. And again, like, the same thing that we found around here is that, like, we make friends with our neighbors, and we might not agree with each other on every single point, but like as a community, I know if shit went down, whatever that may mean, like we can all rely on each other and we all bring something to the table. So that's kind of what we're trying to do on a larger scale with this company. Ultimately, is bring people together and kind of promote and show an alternative way, maybe not an alternative way of thinking, but an alternative way to conduct yourself with other people, move forward in a positive direction, and be a good neighbor in a sense, to build community.
Were you in New York when Hurricane Sandy happened?
What year was that again? Do you remember?
2016,
no,
wasn't it?
No.
Or am I?
Way
no,
earlier.
It was earlier.
Like 2009, God. 2010.
So
wasn't that
think
early?
that I was in
Holy
Texas when Sandy happened.
Okay, so
yeah,
when you said making friends with your neighbors, that saved a ton of people's lives. Absolutely. in my immediate area. We had, 2012. Yeah. Sorry, thank you for looking that up.
Split the difference.
I wasn't in Texas, but I remember it. Yeah,
it was, the next town over, that not the one that we combined schools with. Their town was destroyed. People's houses were like flooded out, and everybody collectively was like, we know those people, like, we know who they are. We're going to bring them in. We're going to help them out the best that we can. We know them. We're a community. They ended up coming to our school. Like, we bus them, like, we're like, the kids need to go to school, so we're going to bring them to school. And it was very much, we knew our neighbors. We knew who they were. We talked with them. Maybe we played sports together. We played against them. But that community building and just knowing the people around you is so important on every level. And like you said, we don't agree on everything, politically or morally or philosophy, or none of that shit matters when something like that happens. When you said, when shit hits the fan, that's not necessarily like, in our little communities, what they think when we say that, we're like, the government's going to come and start knocking on doors and kicking people's doors in and shooting people. Like, sure, that could be, a definition of shit hitting the fan, but, something that's more likely to happen, that has happened, is a natural disaster happens and FEMA can't get out there, or nobody wants FEMA there. And they're just helping each other. You just know people, you're helping each other.
People being people. Thing. And, I mean, during catastrophic and terrible events all throughout history, you can see that it really unifies people. And that's for sure. I mean, that's like the silver lining to terrible things that happen, whether it be, civil war in other countries, whether it be famine, whether it be some sort of climate disaster. People come together and help other people. And obviously, we just spent a lot of time over in Poland, Ukraine, doing work over there. But you see people coming from all over, and whether you're fighting in a popular front, or you're just people coming together to do humanitarian aid work. These types of atrocities that take place globally, like it brings the best out of people, and at the same time, it brings the worst out of certain people, because there's always opportunists that are going to be there to try to capitalize on a bad thing. When we were just over in Poland, Ukraine, and for the last half of the trip, we were working security for a shelter set up for women and children. And, there was quite literally people coming over from countries like Albania that were trying to steal kids to sell their organs on the black market.
Jesus.
And people coming over, and they were trying to kidnap, young women who had come over with just a backpack and no fucking shoes from Ukraine, fleeing their homes, and try to take them and sell them into sex trafficking. So it's like the last half of the trip, we were as a team working security for this shelter. And we fortunately didn't have to deal with too many scumbags, but there were definitely questionable people who are there trying to capitalize on this terrible event taking place to do terrible things to people. So at the same time that the evil shows through, there's like a quote from Edward Abbey that it kind of finishes off saying that the good in people will overcome the evils of this world. And I would like to believe that that's true, even though there's certain things that, dwindle my faith in humans from time to time. But that's one of the things that we try to promote with Guerrilla Tactical is that, the good in people will overcome the evil in this world. And we can, unify. There's a popular front to be said and had. And then we can sort of help to bring community together and continue to cultivate a good culture.
Well, I want to get into the Ukraine, Poland stuff too.
Yeah.
Before we get into that, you mentioned earlier you've lived in all these countries. You see the world in a very different way, and that's something that I've come to appreciate with myself. I have noticed that in the U.S., there has been a huge push towards why do you need to worry about being capable of doing these things? There's an organization that exists so you don't have to. And you're a weird if you do that. Like if, you're, like you're a weird prepper, you're that weird guy that's like doing whatever. And there's this cultural and I think very deliberate effort to make reliance on these organizations that are funded and, ran by the government to be exactly, that, to be relied on, to be depended on. And when you mention these things happening in Ukraine, I mean, it's a very real thing that doesn't just happen there, where people are coming from around the world to harvest organs. They're coming to do terrible things to people. And, sure, the government has some things that are supposed to protect some people, but if you're not there doing those things and protecting those people, they're not going to be protected. And it makes me concerned seeing this what I think is very deliberate effort going on culturally in our country to where, you don't need to know how to do that to, put out a fire. There's a fire department. Oh, you don't need to be able to defend yourself. We have police for that. Oh, you don't need to worry about this. We have whatever. Insert any, government funded organization. And we are not unique and we are not immune from terrible things happening. And like you mentioned, people coming from Albania to harvest kids' organs, like we are not immune to that happening here.
Well, yeah, I mean, just one bad natural disaster, and you've already got people ready to, prey on others. I mean, you see it anytime there's natural disaster and looting starts kicking up, everyone's like, oh, well, opportunity.
Go ahead.
That's really interesting you bring that up, Mitch. It's kind of a topic I've been chomping at the bit to talk about, Nathan's schizo conspiracy weirdo time. And we don't really have time to get into it today, but I really, really fucking want to.
Not an hour and a half.
Not an hour and a half. And I know it's going to be an hour and a half, so I'm going to save it for our solo, which, I don't know, it's going to be in the next week or 3 or 5. I'd sometime.
Go.
But the active war on both, every side of the media on self-sufficiency, and it's everything. It's, oh, well, if you go to the gym, you're a fascist. Oh, fat acceptance and why we should start to drink more soy. And God, Mitch, we were talking about this the other day. The companies that are pushing the fat acceptance movement the most, it's mostly big sugar and government. And it kind of feeds into everything. That my mind is going in so many directions right now, and every single aspect of, be healthy, do good things to yourself, go outside, are being attacked as, oh, well, this is right wing or left wing, or like you shouldn't do this for whatever reason. And I really want to talk about this, but we just don't have time today. I just leak thoughts, okay? Therein lies my problem. That's why Mitch and I balance each other out. He actually keeps a structure. I am just chaos personified. Mitch, go ahead.
So, Jack, you went to Ukraine. You said Ukraine and Poland, or just Poland?
So majority of my time was spent doing humanitarian aid work in Poland. And then I worked on the border of Poland and Ukraine. And during that time, we spent a little bit of time in Ukraine doing the same work.
Got it. And when you said you were protecting the shelter for women and children, did they arm you? Did you arm yourself, or was it go there and just be that force?
So kind of to touch on the points of, just good people sprouting up and going to a, bad situation and doing whatever they can. A lot of these organizations were like grassroots DIY people and organizations. There wasn't actually a lot of government organizations or anything of the sort there on the borders helping. There was the Polish military. They were kind of there trying to keep order or whatever. But as far as that goes, like most of all these organizations were just people wanting to help and do good. And we met people from all over the world who had come to take part in this kind of stuff. So the organization that we were working with and had gotten asked to do security for was no different. It was a non-for-profit organization that had set up this shelter. So they didn't have the ability to arm us physically with firearms. So we had some non-permissive kind of stuff, as well as like pepper spray and stuff that was just our own that we had brought, in case anything got a little bit spicy and, needed it and called for it. Fortunately, we were able to strong arm people. And I'm a big guy. I'm like 6'3" and a bunch of tattoos, and people are afraid of me in that security role, fortunately for my sake. So we didn't really have to do any sort of thing other than strong arm people a little bit and kind of say, hey, you're not supposed to be here. But we did have some kind of non-lethal means of protection if need be.
It's incredibly sad to hear that is necessary, but it is something. I mean, it's necessary, and I can't imagine how it must be for the people over there to know that there are these terrible people that are trying to take advantage of people already fleeing a war and in a terrible situation. It makes me incredibly sad, and I'm glad that there are folks like yourself and organizations that are doing their best to prevent these terrible people from doing terrible things when the governments and militaries just aren't capable, or they just aren't. That's not their focus. It's incredibly sad, and I'm very happy that you were able to go over there and do that. Is there any, we asked you similar with the fishing and that stuff. Is there any organizations that people can go to and support and learn more about what you were doing over there that you can talk about?
So the one thing that we kind of noticed when we first went over, so first I want to give a little shout out to my friend Kieran at the War Club. He and I kind of coordinated and set up this whole trip and went over there together. And then we were a few days into our trip, we were met by another friend who joined up, and the three of us kind of worked as a team in a unit. We worked first in Warsaw at some centers there, and then we shifted to Majdica and the border of Poland and Ukraine, and finished out our trip working down there doing security. But what we found upon arrival is we had some POCs that we had been talking to, trying to get things organized. But it was a little bit unorganized, and there wasn't a lot of structure to it. So when we actually arrived and we hit the ground running, it took a day or two to kind of get into the swing of things and get linked up with some organizations. There's basically at every, like in Warsaw, Krakow, and, many of the border towns, there are just tents set up of organizations helping people. So with the exception of, first making contact to an organization on the ground there, it's a little bit messy, and you could pretty much get a plane ticket to Poland and drive to one of these border towns and go check in at one of these organizations and just be like, what do you need? I'm here. I have these skills. And these are the things that I can do. I feel comfortable doing. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to get put to work because they need people. We actually ended up, it's funny it is, like I wasn't really familiar with the organization, and I have no affiliation with the organization, but United Sikhs was who ended up having us do security, because they were the ones that were kind of taking point on all of the women and children coming over. And they had set up this massive tent and had doctors in there and nurses, tending to the people and just making sure everyone was safe and healthy and, getting the food and, getting where they needed to be. And then we worked the security on the perimeter. So, funny enough, I didn't know anything about the organization. Apparently they're a global organization that goes all over and does food, free food, as well as sets up different humanitarian aid like supplies and like this shelter tent that they had set up. And when I say tent, people think of a small space, but this was a massive space with hundreds of people. So it was a very big tent. So there's definitely some Facebook groups out there and stuff too. I don't know the name of them off the top of my head, but if anyone is interested in going to Poland or Ukraine, feel free to hit us up on the page and send us a message, and I will be happy to pass along any information that I have that would help with someone's trip to go over there and do good.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it's an incredibly beautiful country. I mean, both Ukraine and Poland. I had the pleasure of being in for quite a while and all over the Baltic states, and it's incredibly sad that this is necessary right now. But, it seems like there are good people like yourself, and there's lots of other good people that are trying to do the right thing. And I try and support those people as much as I can. I do think there are a lot of organizations that try and take advantage, and a lot of people that go there and try to take advantage of the situation. Not as heinous as harvesting organs, but just financially for clout, just going over there and not really having any applicable skills. So it's very good to hear that there are people like yourself that do have these applicable skills, these organizations that are trying to help. So, I really appreciate hearing that. And, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's been a really insightful 2 hours. I would love to talk to you more about whaling and illegal fishing. But maybe we'll have to have you on another time. We'll talk about that stuff a little bit more in depth, because I think that is just fucking crazy to me.
This 2 hours super interesting. The spit in your hands, hoist the black flag. I knew someone who was involved with the Sea Shepherds once. She was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's I've definitely lived, not trying to toot my own horn, but by 33, I've definitely lived a very interesting life. And I made the joke in the beginning of the podcast that I should write a book one day. And I feel like I have hours worth of insane stories of stuff that I've been a part of or dealt with overseas, especially on the high seas in Africa, that we could get into, and some really interesting stuff. So these 2 hours have gone by pretty quick in my mind. And I feel like we were just touching on certain things. So I would absolutely love to get the opportunity to come back again and talk about more things of that nature. As long as you don't put this one up and all your ratings drop and you have to cancel the podcast.
Who the fuck cares about? I don't fucking care about our ratings. I'll get you on anyway.
I don't know if you say we're going to talk about pirate shit and African shenanigans. I'm sure the people will turn up.
That would be very interesting, actually.
I mean, do we have time? Do we have time for a very quick story?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm working in the Gambia a few years back, and we show up in the middle of the night, and we're supposed to do a secret pickup of all these soldiers at a designated pickup location, because as soon as anyone in the country is alerted, all of these African countries or not all of them, but most are very corrupt within their own government and people, because there's people living under a lot of oppression there, and as soon as a couple bucks is flaunted in front of their face, they're willing to just spill the beans on everything. So one of the reasons that we had to be so secretive is so no one else outside of this very small unit in their Navy knew that we were there. So I'm in charge we're driving two of the rigid hull inflatable boats out to pick them up. We have two teams of two crew members on board. I'm driving one, I'm operating one, and someone else is operating the other. And we have admiralty charts, which are the charts that, you can apply updates to, and they show all of the ocean. They're essentially maps of the ocean of the designated area that you are, right? So we noticed that these admiralty charts, which are supposed to be updated constantly, are out of date for this African port for the last 50 years. So as you can imagine, things shift, sandbars shift, landscapes change, all sorts of stuff happens, right? Wrecks. And so it's a little bit dangerous. So we're already in the dead of night, and we're trying to, we plot it, plot everything on our charts. We punch it into our navigation system on the boats, and we say, okay, this is the safest way in. We have to deal with the tides. There's a very low swing in tides, which was just going to allow us to kind of skirt over this sandbar to get in to pick up these guys. So we're cruising over there. Everything's good. Pitch black, about 4 a.m. We start moving through, following our plotter through this small channel, and all of a sudden we start getting these depth sounder alarms going off. And I'm like, okay, this isn't normal. Like, this is supposed to be a lot more water below us. And I can look down and I can see the ground. Like, I can see the sandbar under us. And before you know it, we're pushed into the sandbar, and I immediately radio the other rib and I say, you guys got to hold off. Like, we're in a situation over here. So the waves start breaking, the tide's going down. All of a sudden, within minutes, we're pushed onto the sandbar and the boat is beached. And we're supposed to pick up the fucking military, the secret mission, where they're waiting for us on the dock. Like, they're in radio comms with us being like, where are you? And I got to tell these guys, like, one of our boats is stuck on a sandbar about 1.5 miles off the coast. So I'm like, oh, we're dealing with a little bit of problems here. We're trying to sort it out. So we jump in the water. I trim the engines up. We jump in the water, 2 of us, and we're pushing with everything we have to get this boat free. So what I'm noticing is that every time the tide's coming in at this point, so the tide's rising. Every time the waves break, we're able to push the nose of the rib around, and it floats the boat just a little bit, just enough to gain an inch, right? So we're doing this, and we're doing this for like 30 minutes or so, and we're just pushing with everything we have every time. So we get the boat a little further out. One of the other dudes from the other boat swims to us. He jumps in. He helps. We get the boat free. We finally somehow make our way through this sandbar, and we pick up these guys. And at this point, we've probably been in the water for like 40 minutes, like physically in the water, up to our waist, if not a little bit more on this sandbar, about 1.5 miles off the coast. So we get in and we pick these guys up, and they're like, oh, like, they all speak English there, and they were like, what's going on? Like, why were you guys late? Like, was there an issue? Did someone stop you? Like, what's the situation, So we give them the breakdown real quick, and there's this one soldier. He's just like puts his fucking AK down, and he's just shaking his head, and he just has his head in his hands, and he's looking at me like bewildered. And I'm like, dude, what's going on? Like, what's your problem? And he's like, tell me again that you guys were in the water up to your waist, pushing this boat free for like 40 minutes. And I'm like, yes, that's what we did. And he goes, you guys are insane. And I go, why is that? He goes, because we have saltwater crocodiles all around here, and they live just off the coast on these sandbars. And I'm like, sick.
you guys didn't see any?
We had no idea, and we didn't see anything.
I bet they saw you and were like, Jesus, should we do it?
So I have just loads of just these weird stories like that and situations we've been in they're extremely memorable now, and they're funny to tell. But at the time, as soon as he told me that, I was like, are you fucking serious?
Just one of 100 times of I almost died doing X.
Yeah, exactly. Real quick too, I wanted to point out, my wife, she's from Spain, and we met on the ship in Antarctica. So she was doing media. And so I get really lucky with having her as my wife, because she's done stuff for National Geographic, Discovery Channel, all sorts of other publications and things. And she's a professional media person, which we get to reap those benefits on Guerrilla Tactical for free. And she does all the media for the company. So.
I was gonna say, like, it looks like you know your way around a page, but I guess it's the missus.
Yeah,
your photography is like really
I do
well
handle
done.
the page for the most part, but she does total accreditation for her for taking the professional pictures. So I think that's another thing that kind of sets our company apart, is that I do strongly believe that we have a very quality presence on social media as far as our content goes. So it's all little shout out to her.
People underestimate branding. It's like if you have some character and you can have some consistency and some quality to it, people, it sets you apart like that,
Absolutely.
And then all they have to have is a message and a good product.
Yeah. So we're working on bringing all those things together for the future.
I love it. We'll definitely have to have you back. It sounds like we got plenty more to talk about. I'm getting a little bit long in the tooth in the middle of my work week tonight, but otherwise I would love to stay and chat. But anything you guys want to wrap up with?
AWS.
There you go.
Our sponsors, they're awesome. They have really cool belts. If you use code ARTandWAR10, you save some money on an SMU belt. Jack, you get a belt for coming on the podcast. They're pretty cool about that.
They're pretty cool. I really like
talking them about
I say a lot.
I saw that. I saw you. Do you have one of their belts already?
I don't have one of their belts, but I have used one and seen one. I have a Faro Concepts Bison belt for the most part on my main
Boo. I actually don't know anything about.
No other belts exist. Only the AWS.
I'm sure it's a great belt, but AWS is superior.
I'm very much looking forward to getting a little bit more time with one. So that's cool.
Yeah. So huge shout out to AWS. Thank you for sponsoring the show. Dillon Precision. If you want any reloading equipment, huge thank you to them. They're awesome too. Midwest Gun Works. If you want any gun parts, they're great for that stuff. Yeah. So thank you to them. And Jack, huge thank you to you for coming on. As I said, incredibly insightful. I didn't know anything about the whaling, and I want to pick your brain more about that. We'll have to do a part 2 very soon. And yeah, you got to close it out and give everybody some advice.
Dad advice. Go.
Dad advice.
Dad advice, they say.
We're totally not stealing this from Garen Thumb.
I knew I was going to get put on the spot about this. Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the most important things that people can do is take responsibility for their own actions and their own life. I try to live this way every day. It's how I was raised. It's how I was brought up. It's very simple. If you do not want people to fuck with you and fuck with your own life, and you want to be free, you want to live free to that degree and whatever that means, then that also means that it's a double-sided coin, that you shouldn't fuck with other people's lives and you shouldn't impose your ideas on other people, whether that be legal-wise, whether that be, especially government control. Like, one of the double standards that I see constantly is people don't want, the government in their lives. They don't want other people messing with their lives. They want to do their own thing, but then they want the government to pass legislation on other people for things that they agree with. And I just don't think that's right. So, live true to yourself and, be a good person, build community, and lead by example. I think that is one of the most important things someone can do.
Love it.
Absolutely love it. Thank you for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Upstate New York rocks, but I'm happy that I'm not
questionable.
That I'm not there anymore.
Represent what?
Go to Stewart's and get the root beer. All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you for listening. Okay, bye.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.